Route 616, your home for all things Marvel main continuity. Hello everybody, this is Ryan, otherwise known as RJ or RJ Epic One here, and we are back with episode 4 of Route 616. We have a very interesting episode today. There's actually...
one word for it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because this is the first episode where it's probably a majority of comics we don't really enjoy. So it's going to be shit-talking a lot. I'm here with my co-hosts, Dan and Bill.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey. Hello, guys. Yo, stop.
And before we get too far into just going right into the comics, I feel like we should talk about something special that is debuting tomorrow. To get some attention on that bad boy, hopefully. We are launching a new bonus series. It's a topic discussion series where we go into discussions about specific movies, and tomorrow we are debuting the series with a discussion about 30 Days of Night, which should be a lot of fun. So if you're listening to this, please come check that out.
You can start to shame Ryan now they didn't like it.
It should be an interesting conversation to say the least. So if you like topic videos, discussion videos, then come check it out. If you're a fan of the 30 Days of Night movie or not, come give a listen when that debuts. Should be tomorrow.
Yeah, just a little bit of verbal chaos as we all talk about the film.
Exactly. It's gonna be a new series. We're gonna do at least one episode a month. Sometimes we might do a second episode, but we're just gonna play it by ear. It's not gonna have a set schedule like this podcast does. It's just gonna be little bonus videos here and there. It's kind of gonna be like I believe. Well, the working title right now is Crew 616 Chews On, as in like this. We're just gonna chew on a topic. So.
Yeah, like a movie where Bill and I spend the entire thing explaining to Ryan why he's wrong.
Yeah, that's going to be the case. So if you want to hear me get verbally demolished, then come listen. But
I mean, it doesn't have to happen. You just need to get better taste in movies.
Yeah, or accept the opinion of your betters.
On that note, before we start recording the episode early, we're going to discuss what comics we are talking about this week. We are finally starting the long-awaited Strange Tales run that everybody here is excited for. And we will be talking about Strange Tales issues number 101 and 102 in this episode. We will be discussing Tales to Astonish number 36, Journey in the Mystery number 86, and the Incredible Hulk issue number 4, both the A and B story. So this is going to be a fun episode. We're going to start off here with Strange Tales issue number 101. For anyone who doesn't know this, listens to this. This is their attempt at a solo series, a solo run for the Human Torch, and it's certainly an interesting time. I'll tell you what. This is done by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Well, I guess it's co-written by his brother Larry. We have Dick Ayers on inks, Jack Kirby's doing the cover, Artie Simek on letters, and this was released July 1962. What a bad month for comics, I guess.
I think the Thor that came out that month was pretty good.
Oh yeah, but it's the same month then, yeah. Oh wait, I don't know.
The orders really...
I guess whichever Thor came out that month would have been good, because it's either the Loki story or it's the Man of Tomorrow.
Written yet. These had to kind of move ahead to fit with Fantastic Four chronology, but like Thor's second or third story is October, so... Yeah, this is the third Thor is October.
Are you going by cover or release?
Cover.
Yeah, that's why. Then the release on that third one would also be July. Then,
okay, then it was the bad Thor story.
Oh yeah.
The one with the communists.
Okay, well,
That's
I guess
evil,
we will.
dastardly communists.
I am gonna take the Strange Tales summary because this should be a lot of fun. So let's get right into this. This has been the episode I've been waiting for. Okay, star in
And to be
America's.
fair, mocking this comic will be a lot more fun than reading it was.
Oh, I mean, yes. So this is starring, and I quote, America's favorite superhero, the Human Torch. Good thing we're Canadian.
By permission of the Fantastic Four magazine, because they need to get permission from their own magazine.
Yeah, I'm glad they touched on that. So we open up with Human Torch successfully outracing atomic-powered guided missiles. So yeah, and he's like, but that's enough kidding around for one day, is it?
Who's firing missiles at him?
Oh, he's just racing a missile from a test facility because he's an asshole.
That's not important.
Okay.
Like a meteor in the night, the fiery figure streaks over Long Island, so he gets to his home in Glenville. So this is kind of where we're first introduced to Johnny and Sue Storm's home at Glenville. He says how his community's become real popular and mentions how the Invisible Girl lives here, and it's like, well, she is your sister, so probably.
Yeah, the problem with this is everyone fucking knows the Invisible Girl lives there.
Mm-hmm. Which
and
he
her
mentions.
brother Johnny is also famous on the Fantastic Four, but no one knows that he's the Human Torch and he has a secret identity now.
He literally thinks to himself, he's like, but though everyone in town knows my sister Sue is the Invisible Girl, no one knows that I'm the Human Torch. And then there's an editor's note here that's like, 4 Johnny's schoolmates did know a secret identity, but they graduated high school last term. Now one of them is in the Army, 2 are away at college, and the 4th is working in Chicago. All have been sworn to secrecy.
The days before
words,
social
we want to
media.
write a DC-style superhero story with a secret identity, and we only have 5 superheroes on our roster.
Yep. And
Wow.
he thinks to himself how it's a good thing the town isn't aware of his other identity. He likes it better not being known as the Flamin' Freak, so he thinks. And he's like, oh, it's a good thing Mr. Fantastic helped me to sign this asbestos room in case I have a nightmare and accidentally flame on while I'm asleep. And then we get a tour of his room and all the ways it's protected with asbestos to so nothing gets
So
burnt
Johnny's
down.
getting cancer.
Yeah. I can't wait for that storyline.
Literally everything is made out of asbestos.
He's like, I wonder what the Glenville kids would say if they knew that Johnny Storm's actually the Human Torch. And then we go into another fucking origin retelling of the Fantastic Four, but fully from Johnny's perspective. And
I'm actually
he
okay
dreams
with
it.
that.
Me too. It's actually a really good retelling.
It
although,
is, and it makes sense that some of the kids that bought this magazine didn't buy Fantastic Four, so they wouldn't know who he was.
yes, I just find it the funny part about that is just how many times it's already happened. But it makes sense because you don't have the internet or anything, so you gotta.
Yeah, there's no way for them to know until it gets reprinted. So
Exactly. So we get a nice little retelling, which is honestly the best part of the issue. And
it
then
really is.
we go. That's not even a joke. That's legit. But while Johnny relives the legendary origin, which is literally what they say here. Let us turn our attention elsewhere in Glenville, where a mysterious figure lurks in the shadows.
It's Hydra.
We see somebody looking out towards an amusement park.
AIM, sorry, it's an AIM trooper.
And they're like, it is time for the Destroyer to strike. So this is the first appearance of a character called the Destroyer, not any of the ones that are known, because this is the first and only appearance of this version of the Destroyer.
I don't even really want to call them a version because they're not related to anyone else carrying.
That's the wrong wording. No, they're not related to any of the Destroyers.
This
Drax
is just
or otherwise.
Drax, 1940s era Captain America knockoff.
There's one that got a
Giant
Max story that was
Machine.
pretty good. Then we see Johnny and his friends on his way to school the following day, where they pass Glenville's newest entertainment site, which happens to be the amusement park that the Destroyer was looking at.
Well, what a coincidence.
And at that moment, the office of Charles Stanton, publisher of the town's newspaper, they get a note arriving in the mail, and it says, "Construction of the amusement park must stop. If it doesn't, I shall strike the destroyer." And it's all in you cut words out of friggin' magazines or something, and then paste them on the paper, all split apart to make a statement. And we see
this is so dumb when you know who the destroyer is.
It's yeah. We see the
garbage bag kid.
We see Charles Stanton. We see Charles Stanton, the publisher of the town's newspaper, crumple up the paper and it's just some crank note. Probably some nut who's got a fin against people having fun.
I'm just going to mention right now that Stanton's saying this out loud in an empty room by himself.
In his empty office by himself.
Yes, his office. But the point is, there's no one he's saying this to.
No. And keep that in mind for later.
So he's J. Jonah Jameson.
No. This is worse.
They mention how the warning is ignored, and then the next day we see how on a roller coaster it's breaking down, and they're like, "Oh, the guy will be killed," and then we see Johnny thinking to himself, "Oh," he might as well say, "Oh golly, I gotta find a way to change it to the Human Torch here." He doesn't actually say that, but that's my interpretation. He's just thinking about how he's gonna flame on though, so nobody here will find his secret identity out, and then he's like, "Wait, that cigarette lighter, that's the answer." So he creates a huge cloud of smoke by using he's using his powers to make this huge cloud of smoke so he can then turn into the Human Torch.
Yes, he can now control any fire around him.
So yeah,
this
there's
power
that.
he never had before and will never have again once they get bored of it in this series.
Yes. So we see the Human Torch come out of the billowing smoke. I don't know where he came from. And
I don't know how none of the people a foot away from him didn't get burned.
He manages to catch the fallen guy from the roller coaster, and the crowd's like, "Oh look, the Human Torch saved them." That is only the end of page number 5 here. He's
I have another bone to pick before we go any further.
Okay, that's fine.
This guy's in the roller coaster. Their excuse for him being there is they have an expert test the roller coaster before they open it to the public so no one gets hurt. But no one controls a roller coaster from on it. They could just send the trains around empty. So they just put this poor fucker in the roller coaster and risk his life for absolutely no reason.
It's one way to do it.
To be fair, it's the 60s, so...
I mean, to be fair, if somebody's not in danger, what's the point in having a superhero?
Yeah, but I'm trying to look at this without the medium in mind.
We can't get that existential. We'll be asking what's the point of the Human Torch next.
What is the point of the Human Torch?
To raise my blood
That's a good
pressure.
question.
He's like, Chris Evans something to do before he became Captain America.
Pretty much, yeah.
He's like, "I can't keep my flame on much longer. I'll land and become Johnny Storm again." He lands back in the smoke, by the way.
Power is back as a thing.
He lands back in the smoke that's somehow still billowing here. They're like, "Oh, at last the smoke's cleared," implying that it's been there the whole time. And they're like, "I can see again."
It has been. When he's flying around, you can just see this giant billowing cloud of smoke.
Oh, we keep interrupting Ryan. He's never gonna finish this.
Dude, it's all right. He's just.
I have a lot of issues with this issue.
Yeah, this is gonna be. This series sucks. This is gonna be a lot when we talk about these issues. Yeah. They're like, "Oh, just as it reached the top of the coaster, the track broke, and as though it had been cut." Whoa! Why would somebody sabotage a roller coaster, though? And the other person here is like, "No reason. It must have just been an accident, probably due to faulty construction." And then we go back to the Glenville Gazette, which is now its name we're actually given, where Stanton's like, we got another crank note. And it's like, maybe there's something to this. I'd better see the owner of the park. As we see, the note says, yesterday I almost killed a man. Unless construction of the amusement park stops, I shall strike again, the destroyer.
At least this time there's a random secretary to hear him talking, so he's not just yelling into the void.
Yes, that is
bad guys.
Nice
Making
touch.
sure people didn't have a good time since 1962.
And we go back to the amusement park where one of the guys is like, there's probably no connection, you know? Well, there's no connection between the crank who calls himself the Destroyer and the Finn Sabineer.
Yeah, totally.
And Stanton's like, well, I just wanted to bring it to your attention. And then we go to a few days later where there's guys testing the parachute jump out. And then suddenly they see that the tower's breaking and the ride is gonna fall. So Johnny's like, oh my god, there's never emergency. Never jump for the Human Torch. I better
God, why can't we
out-
give people parachutes when they take these rides?
I better figure out how to divert the attention of the crowd. So he sets his one finger on fire so he can shoot out fireballs, and the crowd gets distracted by these fireballs, and he runs into this this is hilarious. He runs into this clown mouth, go into this thing called Funland, so he can then change into the Human Torch and fly out. I don't know why he distracted the crowd to then run into this fucking funhouse and then switch to the Human
fire
Torch.
when they were all not looking. He did that a minute ago.
That's my point. and then we see the Human Torch welding the ride back together so it doesn't all fall down. And then we go to part 2 of the story, which is called The Flame and Fury Strikes Back. And we see that the torch has officially saved the tower. And then Johnny's like, I better figure out a way to get back being Johnny Storm before my pals notice I'm missing. He's like, I'll divert the crowd's attention this time by molding a duplicate Human Torch out of my flame. Excuse me, what? Johnny Storm fucking creates a fucking fire replica out of flame, and this is the thing about this is the use of his power that pisses me off the most. He creates flaming fucking duplicates, and they actually take it a step further in the future Fantastic Four issue that's even more ridiculous.
Yes, this whole era is terrible for Johnny's powers.
So they're so like, hey, what's that? What's the torch doing? Then they're like, which one's the real torch? And they're like, it must be the one that's flying. And then Johnny becomes himself again. We see the decoy fall apart. I don't know how he got the switch back when people were looking at the flying one, but we won't talk about that.
Yeah, not one of them thought to look at the version of the Human Torch still standing right there.
Yeah, this is... Whew.
Stan Lee at his finest.
Keep in mind that this series for the first, I think it's like 5 or so issues, is all about like him trying to keep his identity, and it quickly flips on a dime, and it's the most hilarious switch up in a title I've ever read, which we'll get to in a few episodes, I imagine.
This series switches a few times because they can't hit something that people actually want to read.
And what? Okay, they talk about the decoys fading away. I had to figure out what was actually going on. They're like, whoa, that couldn't have been the torch. The real torch is gone. They're like, Johnny's friend's like, that was some show, huh? And Johnny's like, it sure was. Then there we see Stanton talking to a park worker or owner, whoever he is, and he's like, 2 warning notes followed by 2 near accidents. It can't be just a coincidence. And then Stanton's like, whoever this destroyer is, he's not just a crank, he means business. Then we see Johnny reading a newspaper that says, Destroyer challenges the Human Torch to battle. And Johnny's like, he dares to meet me alone at a cabin on the outskirts of town? He's like, okay, you've got it. And then we go to that night with Johnny about to leave for the encounter, and we get our Thing cameo. Finn shows up. Johnny's like, "What are you doing here?" And Finn's like, "I can read. This destroyer guy's too much for a kid like you to handle. I've come to take your place." He's like, "I'll meet that creep and pulverize him. I wish." Johnny's like,
That
"No
would have been a
thanks.
much better comic.
This is my fight and I'm not running from it." And Finn's like, "You stubborn brat. Use your head. I can help you." And then the fourth and last panel that the Finn came into this issue for is sees the Finn walking away, all like, "Bah, should have known I was wasting my time," as Johnny's like, "The destroyer is my challenge, so I'm not gonna chicken him. So thanks for coming, Finn." Then we see Johnny Storm going out as the amazing Human Torch, as he's called here, and he finds the cabin that he was challenged to a battle to from the destroyer.
But
The Human Torch sees a figure sitting in the chair in the dark. He's like, "There he is, waiting for me. He must have some trick up his sleeve." And he burst in. He still just burst in, though. He's like, "Okay, destroyer, I don't know what powers you've got, but I'm pitting mine against them." He's like, "Don't you hear me? I said I'm accepting your challenge. Come on, stand up and face me." And then this is when Johnny learns it's a fucking dummy. And at that moment, the torch unwittingly trips an electric eye beam. And then we see... we see liquid foam falls onto the Human Torch that doses his flame. And then we see the destroyer standing outside. He's like, without his flame, the torch is powerless, and my trap worked. Now I just have to finish him off." But before the destroyer can, he sees some teenagers, so they mess up his plan. And he's like, "Oh, I must not let the teenagers find me."
I'd have
And
gotten
Johnny's
away
like,
with
"Oh."
it if it wasn't for those kids and their damn dog.
Johnny's like, "Oh, here comes some kids. They might have seen me enter here as the torch. I'd better think fast." And so Johnny's like, "Hey, fellas, which way did the torch run?" And the kid's like, "Oh, I don't know. Did you see him?" And Johnny's like, "Yes, I spotted him going into the woods and followed him to the cabin. I wanted to discover his real identity." And the teenager's like, "Oh, nuts." And Johnny narrowly preserves his secret identity, but does make it out as he returns home to ponder his next move. And he thinks about how he's got to figure out who the destroyer is, because he'll do anything to wreck the amusement park. And Johnny's like, "If only I had, wait a minute, I do have a clue." So he thinks about how the destroyer tried to wreck only the taller rides, and while he didn't sabotage the Ferris wheel or merry-go-round.
Probably because people won't die if they just fall off that, but Stan needs convenient Deus Ex Machina to explain this plan.
And we see Torch on top of the roller coaster, and he's like, "Oh, so that's my hunch was right." And then we see a commie submarine out in the distance as they see Human Torch and call him the Yankee Man of Fire, as they discover that Torch has seen them. They submerge into the water. And Human Torch is like, "Oh, I'll make the water too hot that they have to remain there." Okay, what? Yeah, that's what he says.
He boils the water.
He boils the water. That sounds unsafe, quite honestly. One of them's Lily saying how they can hardly breathe. I'm pretty sure Torch is not being a good guy right now.
I'm pretty sure none of this would actually work on a submarine either.
Yes, but yeah. But then the sub comes back up, and we see some of the good guys come and grab those commies. So thank God. And Johnny's like, "And now for the leader of the Red Spies," as he's going to grab the destroyer, and he goes grab the destroyer. He's like, "Yeah, let's get him." And the destroyer's like, "You'll never take me alive." And then Johnny just straight up throws a fireball at the gun that the destroyer's holding to melt it. So
Because
it was
he's a
that
wizard.
easy. Oh, God damn it. And then that's when we find out all along the destroyer was none other Then Charles Stanton? Holy shit, it's the publisher of the town newspaper. I can hardly believe it.
Oh my god, the only person with a name we met in this issue that we didn't already know.
Oh, this is one of the worst twists I've ever read in a comic. They're like, but why do you want the amusement park closed? That's simple. He was he was smuggling information to the Reds. He was smuggling information to the Red Sub. This secluded area, and no one was able to see what was going on until the roller coaster and parachute jump were built. From up there, anyone could see the subsurface. So, they wanted the amusement park gone because from the high up rides, you could see the commie submarine in the water.
And it never occurred to him to just do it at 2 a.m. when the amusement park is closed.
So to make sure he wasn't discovered, Stanton had to stop the amusement park from opening. And Johnny's just like, my flame won't last much longer, I've got to zoom off fast. So then he just flies off before anybody can thank him, blah blah. And that is where our issue ends, and so the Destroyer is finished, but for the Human Torch there'll be another gripping adventure in the next issue, Strange Tales, one of the most disappointing closings to an issue ever. And that was Strange Tales issue number 101.
It was worse than I remembered.
Yeah, actually, I couldn't really remember what happened in this first issue, and I know why now.
So at some point, the Russians didn't go, hey, why don't we just get one of our guys in Berlin to, buy a newspaper, tie a rock to it, and throw it across the Berlin Wall to us? We need to use one of our greatest assets, the Soviet sub, to go to, wherever in the United States to steal a newspaper.
Well, I mean, I've learned from comic books that if they have a lot of anything, it's subs and other super weapons.
Yeah, or even better, they could put, get an old clothes hanger, hook it to the antenna set up on their television, and watch an American TV news show. I'm
true.
sorry.
I don't know what other secrets a small-town newspaper editor would have access to that they're interested in. Apparently there's a naval base there.
Well, at that point, the Rothschilds were selling secrets to the Russians anyway, so,
That is true.
I
suspect Stan didn't know that.
Well, I can see why you guys didn't like this one. I can.
Whoa, really?
Well, it's... Okay, Human Torch is not exactly the greatest fucking comic book character ever to begin with. But the motivations and the methodology and all that stuff about it is so stupid. It's like, just... So we're gonna, have this bad guy who puts people's lives in danger so that he, if he didn't do that, then he could have kept on, selling newspapers to the Russians, and no one ever would have been the wiser.
Yeah, he basically, by creating this supervillain identity, he ceded his own defeat.
Yeah.
Because no one would have cared.
Yeah. And that's the thing. If he had not done any of this, he could have just kept on going on as he was, and everybody would have been happy.
It's...
just say
my brain just broke. I don't even know what I was about to say.
It's kind of like the Indiana Jones movies. The Germans would have opened the Ark no matter what Indiana Jones did.
Yeah.
Right. There's no point in him even being in the movie.
I know what I was going to say. I was going to be like, I've never been so pissed off reading this comic order as I was when he first made that fucking fire duplicate. That fucking pissed me off.
Oh, you know what? That was one of the only parts that didn't annoy me. No, seriously. Right? It's just like the whole story is absolutely pointless. The villain... I can see why the villain only ever showed up once. Because...
Yeah, this is pure Golden Age.
This story is the shits. This is like the worst. This is the worst instincts and aspects of Stan Lee's storytelling all rolled up into one.
Yeah, this is just everything wrong with trying to read the Golden Age order.
Yeah.
Because if you read Golden Age comics, they're all like this. doesn't matter which company pretty much. There's some that are good, but like 90% of them are this level of thought into the villain, this much random bullshit, one or two made up powers that they never had before.
Yeah.
And the villain is just whoever the one character is that got a name that isn't a regular, wearing a mask.
Yeah. And there's more shitty twists like this to come. Don't you worry, folks.
Honestly, the Destroyer didn't bother me that much, because with these B-tier anthology books like Strange Tales, Journey into Mystery, and Tales to Astonish, terrible villains are kind of the norm for a while. Like, they get the good villains in the 20 pagers where they can expand on them, but
Yeah.
I think why it bugged me more than what bugged you is because this was my first one.
that is true. I was kind of prepped for it being terrible, even though this was my first one too. But even when I originally read it, I was prepped for the villains being awful in early Silver Age stuff, so I wasn't expecting anything from them.
I expect them not to be great, but I don't think I was ready for these shitty twists.
Yeah, it's older not knowing how to make a solo Torch story work and wanting to follow the tropes of superhero fantasy at the time, and therefore completely ignoring everything they established in Fantastic Four that broke those tropes. And just all the the bullshit about keep my secret identity. The shenanigans would I've got to sneak away and change into my hero identity without anyone knowing. And the story that they know who Sue is, but don't know about him.
And again, not to spoil anything to come, but they literally throw the plot line away of his secret identity in like 5 issues here, and it's done in the most hilarious way, which I can't wait for us to talk about.
Yes, it is truly terrible and yet hilarious.
It's
actually
fucking
one of my
hilarious.
favorite things in Strange Tales.
It's
Not
so
for reasons they planned.
It's so bad. It's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, it's room level bad.
Yeah.
I guess we should say that was a 1-star comic, in case you didn't figure that out somehow.
Yeah, this was 1 star for me too. It made me actively angry reading it because it was so bad.
Yeah. No, I was actively annoyed for sure reading it. And on that note, do we have any more notes on Strange Tales 101?
Not
Don't
me.
read this unless you're insane like we are.
Yeah, essentially. Unless you're a masochist like us, don't read this comic.
Or be friends
that
with
note-
people who do read those comics.
Yes.
Just saying.
On that note, I guess we're going to move on to Tales to Astonish number 36, which the story is called The Challenge of Combat X. Did I even say what the last story was called when we went into... Oh, it's just called The Human Torch, that's why. And this one's done by... Well, actually, Larry is writing this issue, but Jack is on art. Stan's just the editor here, apparently. Inks by Ayers, cover arts Kirby. This is another one from July 1962 for the release date.
I haven't really paid attention to the release dates when I initially read this, but I'm noticing a trend that like all the terrible communist stories came right after the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah. Drift off on a side topic here. My father told me stories about how when I was little, during that scare, when JFK was, dealing with the Russians, then after he died, I think it was Johnson took over as vice president.
Yes.
And he said, especially even here in Canada, there was a great deal of concern in Canada's case because the Russians could have come right across the north, right across the North Pole to get at us. But he said, and I remember in school, like in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, where we were having drills just in case a nuclear war happened. Right, and we did. We were having drills. It was, what are we going to do to survive? We need, bomb shelters, all this stuff. And I was growing up just kind of on the tail end of all of that silliness. So the Russians being the bad guys was kind of a default situation because although, the North Vietnamese were bad guys too, at that point and stuff like that, it was the Russians who were the great fear, right? Because they could bomb the shit out of us if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So anyway, I can see why they keep defaulting to Russians as bad guys. That makes perfect sense.
This is just a little more specific because I just pegged that all the generic communist villains we've had in the last little bit were all July releases. Not just generic communist stories being around, but basically every comic published this month has a communist villain, and it's right after the missile crisis.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Because that was a scary time. I was far too young. I was only like 4 months old when the missile crisis happened. But I can remember Mom and Dad talking about it, as I was getting older, and how terrifying it was for them, this standoff between Russia and the United States. And to be fair, my mother was not a big fan of John F. Kennedy. She was not. She felt he was as much a warmonger as some of the other ones, and that he was on the edge of provoking a war. But there was about 2 straight days where everybody in the world was holding their breath, waiting to see if we were going to go to war.
Yeah, and it came down to someone not following orders that we...
Yep, that's right. A certain Russian submarine... Was it a Russian submarine officer or something?
I'm not sure what sort of vessel he was on, but he got the order to fire
and didn't do it. Yeah. Yeah, that saved the world as we know it. But it also birthed a lot of stories and books that would later manifest themselves as zombie stories, stories like Command E from Jack Kirby, living through a nuclear war, right? There were a lot of books and some comic books that really were centered around the survivors of a nuclear war and the damage it could do to the world. How most people wouldn't live through it. And, it spawned an entire genre of story that, didn't exist really before that.
I think they kind of played with that back in World War II, too, because back then they were publishing stuff like Tuck the Cave Boy.
Oh, I suppose, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Time, but it was after a previous great civilization had destroyed themselves.
Yeah. Well,
and so they were playing with the same idea. It's really any time we get close to destruction, people start thinking about what would it look like afterwards.
Yeah, well, it spawned the Planet of the Apes series. Pierre Boulle had written Planet of the Apes, and when they were making the movie, they went over to, the Earth being destroyed by a nuclear war. Because the book and the movie are completely different from each other. But it also spawned stories like Damnation Alley, which was a brilliant novel.
I did like that one.
Yeah, it was really good. Anyway, that's my drift off into Never Never Land again for you.
Yeah.
I was just drinking my cider while you guys were talking.
Drinking on the job.
Well, as if I'm paid for this.
It's just shameful.
As if any of us are.
I mean, how are Bill and I supposed to be associated with you, you friggin' lush?
Well, I'm Scottish and Irish, so...
Okay.
Anyways. Moving on to Tales to Astonish number 36, question mark? Is that, yeah? That's the one.
We were summarizing it when we got...
Yeah, sorry.
The generic commie villains were...
Yeah, I just went over
July.
the basic shit, because, July triggered the offense, yeah. So I'm going to let Bill tackle this issue.
All right. This is a much better comic than the last one, but that doesn't mean it's good.
No.
We have the astonishing Ant-Man, the challenge of Comrade X, and the title splash page, which is quite good, is Comrade X wearing a pair of hobnailed boots, attempting to stomp on Ant-Man and a bunch of ants.
To be fair, I think besides Thor, that Ant-Man is Jack Kirby's best work at the moment.
Yeah.
For what we're reading.
He does good work with the perspective. And we open to a scene in a bank where a bunch of thieves have tried to rob the bank and gotten themselves locked in the vault, which is a time-release vault. And they're worried they're going to suffocate before they can get out. Fortunately, Ant-Man has climbed into the gears and is manually working the tumblers. And so he pops them free where they're caught by the guards and heads off on his army of ants. And news of this story is picked up behind the Iron Curtain, because we're not saying Russia at this point, by a vaguely Stalin-looking man sitting under the giant painting of Khrushchev, in case there's any confusion about where we actually are. And he calls in Comrade X, who looks like Doctor Strange with an even more impressive mustache. And this Russian man who doesn't look anything like Stalin anymore. Apparently they got bored of that after one panel, because now he's just drawn as generic Kirby villain number 14. Says that he wants him to find out Ant-Man's secret to shrinking and enlarging so that they can shrink their army down to ant size and sneak it across the border.
What a clever idea.
Yeah, this is actually one of the better generic commie plots.
Just remember, everybody, anybody with a goatee or Van Dyke is a bad guy.
Yes.
At this point
or
in
full
time.
beard at this point.
Yeah, I suppose.
Really just facial hair. And Comrade X says that he will leave the building helpfully marked CCCP for the few people that actually know that acronym to realize where we are located.
Triple CP.
Yes. And so Comrade X heads off to America, and a couple of days later, we see a woman in the police office, and she wants to get in touch with Ant-Man.
Oh, she wants to touch Ant-Man?
What was that, Dan?
She wants to touch Ant-Man?
Get in touch with.
Oh, okay.
She probably wants to touch him too, but
yeah, Paul Rudd kind of cute. You know, gotta admit.
Can't blame somebody for wanting to touch Paul Rudd.
There you
Although
go.
this is Henry Pym, so I mean.
Oh, okay.
I don't even remember who played Hank in the movie.
Michael Douglas.
Oh yes, well that's also a fair choice.
Yes, to be fair.
Yeah, he was in the streets of San Francisco back then.
Yeah.
Or, well, not back then, but back in the 70s.
Yes. Anyway, she wants to get in touch with Ant-Man, but the police don't know how to help her do it because they don't know how to reach out to Ant-Man. He just randomly shows up whenever there's trouble. Fortunately, there are a bunch of ants in their trash bin. And those ants hear her wanting to talk to Ant-Man and run out and relay the message all the way across the city to where Hank Pym picks it up on his ant communication devices. And he decides that he needs to go to work, so he puts on his Ant-Man comic costume, shrinks down, jumps into his little launching catapult, and launches himself towards the police station, where an army of ants make a mound for him to safely land on.
Get used to this bullshit. It's the Ant-Man catapult is a mainstay for a while. It's mainstay still where I'm at, and I still don't fully get the logic of how he's able to land on these goddamn ants. With the other logic we've been given about how his powers work, and he doesn't kill any of these damn ants.
Well, I think his strength remains the same, but his mass does not because Stan doesn't understand physics.
Okay. I guess I'll let him have it.
It's amongst the less questionable scientific elements in a Marvel comic from the 60s.
Yeah, I don't know why that's just stuck out to me every time I see this happen. But,
Yeah. So he gets on an ant, and he sees the woman getting into a taxi to go to her hotel. So him and his aunt get into the taxi with her, climb up on the seat, and crawl into her purse in one of my favorite panels in the strip, because you just see the ant going headfirst into her purse on her lap. And it's actually a really funny image. And so they arrive at the hotel, and Ant-Man and the ant crawl out of her purse, and Ant-Man starts talking to her. At this point, he can be heard despite the fact that he's ant size.
Okay.
They toy around at various times with the sound waves not being perceivable by the human ear when he's tiny. But that's a thing that comes and goes, and at this point he's gone.
I just read a Fantastic Four issue where he couldn't be heard, and so they definitely play with that quite a bit.
It really just depends on which science show Stan was listening to recently. But anyway, he talks to the woman, and she reveals that she used to be in love with a man in Europe until she learned that he was the deadly Red Master spy known as Comrade X.
Dum, dum, dum.
And he jilted her for another woman. So she didn't dump him because he was a communist spy. She only dumped him when he cheated on her.
Oh my god,
jerk.
he's a commie and a cheat?
Oh, fuck.
Oh my god.
And so she decided that she wants revenge on him for breaking her heart. So that's why she's come to the U.S. to disrupt his mission to capture the Ant-Man. And she tells him that he can beat Comrade X to the punch because Comrade X is hiding on a freighter docked at Pier 89, and he can run down there and surprise him before he's ready. So Ant-Man hops on his ant and heads off to Pier 86 to get on this freighter, picking up an army of ants along the way. And they all head right up the gangplank, where they trigger another electronic eye that's set out to capture ants. And Comrade X, who's on the freighter, gets a big glass box and hides behind the door. And when all the ants come around the door, he puts the box over them. And they're now trapped.
Clever.
And the box has air holes in them so that they can breathe on the way back to Russia. Ant-Man can't send his electronic impulses through the glass, but fortunately he can send them through the air holes. So he thinks really hard at an air hole. And all the ants on the pier hear him, or pick up the sense. They're never entirely clear on how this ant communication works. At this point it's basically telepathy.
So it's not really a peer review.
No.
But I'm ching. Sorry.
And the ants get a bunch of logs and stuff and throw them in the water and ride the logs out and find the anchor chain.
Logs?
Like pieces of wood and stuff. They're little tiny logs.
Twigs.
They're probably twigs, but they're drawn like logs because this is done at ant perspective.
Okay.
And they climb up the anchor chain, get on the ship, and find the guys guarding the glass box and sting the shit out of them. So that one of the guys drops his rifle, shattering the box, and Ant-Man gets free. And him and his ants run off and get into a hole and climb into the bowels of the ship and go sneaking through the ship until they find Comrade X talking on the radio to his masters. And so they go up on the ceiling and free the lamp hanging from the ceiling, which immediately falls directly onto his head and knocks him out. And then Ant-Man grows to normal size and contacts the authorities, while the ants go and get the key to the crew compartment and lock the door and sneak off with the key. And then Ant-Man shrinks back down and goes after Comrade X, who I might remind you was knocked out in the room. I guess that's supposed to be a radio operator that he knocked out with the lamp.
Yeah, I think
It's
so.
drawn with Comrade X's model.
That's, yeah, but I mean, it's also Jack Kirby, so.
Yeah, so I assumed it was Comrade X up until he's explaining it right now and realized that there's no reason he would need to go to get Comrade X somewhere else if that was him.
I assumed it was a different person when I had read it, but yeah, I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah. Anyway, so it goes to get Comrade X and take him by surprise. But Comrade X knew he was there and has DDT in his spray gun. And so he starts trying to squirt Ant-Man with the DDT, but all the ants climb onto the lights and block out the room. So he panics and can't find Ant-Man. Well, Ant-Man goes and ties his shoes together. So when he tries to run away, he trips on his shoelaces and falls down, and then the ants swarm over him and pull off his face, revealing that he was the woman from the police station earlier.
What?
And, she's shocked that Ant-Man knew about this, but Ant-Man reveals that he knew the whole time because when he crawled into her purse to hide with the ant, he found the mask and voice changer hidden in there. And she's like, well, you may have figured out my secret, but you'll still never get off the ship alive. But that's when Ant-Man reveals that he was clever enough to have radioed the Coast Guard earlier, and they've arrived to capture everyone on the ship. And so he just hops on his ant and leaves, and presumably the Coast Guard takes everyone into custody, and the issue is completely solved.
Another shitty twist ending. 2 in a row. Let's go.
Yes, but this story as a whole was much more coherent than the Human Torch one. I gave this
definitely.
1 2 stars.
I like that I like that Ant-Man calls her Madam X too there as well. I gave this one 2 stars as well. I was thinking when we were talking about the guy that looked like Comrade X but wasn't, that got knocked out by a lamp. First off, is he actually alive? Secondly, I think ours are probably colored different too, so that's why mine was probably more obvious than yours.
Mine is, they are colored differently. One's wearing a purple suit,
okay,
one's wearing
so
a
it's the
brown
same.
suit.
Oh, it's green for me.
Or green, rather. But I'm used to coloring errors enough that half the time when someone's only on for a page, for a panel or two, I don't really put a lot of credibility into their coloring, because it's the exact same jumpsuit both times.
Fair.
And so, I just assumed, since this was a recolored issue, that they had screwed it up, given that in one panel Comrade X is black.
I don't think they are in mine, but I might have
In mine, it's him in the disguise. Or no, it's him as the woman. It's her. Without the disguise, in her hotel room, she's colored with the terrible gray color they use. They couldn't display black people because of the because of the coloring, or the comic code. You'd think I was the one drinking, not Ryan.
Yeah, I know. This is embarrassing. Jeez,
she does
Bill.
have a weird gray.
That's their black.
Well, maybe she was seasick from being on the boat.
Yeah,
did we ever think of that?
For a while, wouldn't allow them to feature black characters prominently, so they started coloring them gray as a workaround. And apparently people actually fell for that.
Yeah, we'll be seeing that a lot, especially when we get the Nick Fury. Or Sergeant Fury, I should say. So yeah, this was the first appearance of Comrade X. Actually, not the last. They next appear.
She actually shows back up.
Oh yeah, this is just her
in
first
West
appearance.
Coast Defenders number 33.
Okay, it's a 1985 comic. That's why I know this.
We've got to wait till the mid to late 80s to see her again. But
I'm amazed they called back to that.
Honestly,
she's not that memorable character.
She's not, like, considering all the shit going on in this era, she's actually far from the worst too. So I can kind of see where they could have some fun playing with the concept again. Plus, it's West Coast Defenders, so
true. She's our best generic communist villain, but she's still just a generic communist villain.
True, but having a female bad guy is a nice sort of change. Right, the femme,
Yeah, I'm
the
pretty
femme
sure a lot
fatale.
of people actually fell for the twist just because she was a woman.
Probably.
It
Yeah,
would have been like looking at the police sergeant and stuff. Like, is he the communist?
and now we see where Wes Craven stole his idea for Scream, the rubber mask and the voice changer. God, the plagiarism. Just terrible, really.
Yeah. But yeah, I really don't have a lot on this comic. It's decent, but
It's relatively unimportant. I mean,
it's just the same generic communist story we've gotten 3 times this month already.
yeah, it's another twist ending right after the last one, albeit a better story and better one in general, but still. Well, I guess on that note, we'll move on to Journey of the Mystery, number 86. And Stan Lee and Jack Kirby back at it. Apparently Larry's co-writing again. He's getting work this month. And this one's from September 1962. Artie Simmock's here to do some letters, and Dick Ayers is here to ink and help Jack on the cover. And I don't think there's... Oh, what... The story is called On the Trail of the Tomorrow Man. And this is a surprisingly fun issue, which I will let Bill tackle this one as well.
You're sticking me with the time travel one.
Well, I only stuck you with this one so I can take Strange Tales again.
Fair enough. For the record, I hate time travel stories, like travel to the future specifically.
I didn't
The
think
ones
this
in the
one
past
was
are usually pretty
too
bad, but this one's not bad. But it's just,
convoluted.
it's not that they're convoluted. It's just it's not what I want from my comics.
Wow.
But anyway, this is Thor the Mighty on the Trail of the Tomorrow Man, and we open to a splash panel of Thor being menaced by a bald man in a Kirby jumpsuit and 3 giant robots. We get one notable landmark in that this is the first comic in the order with full credits. Actually, in the page. So basically, Stan plotted it and then left it to Artie or to Larry to actually write everything. But we open looking at an hugely futuristic city, and it's Earth 3 centuries from now, where mankind has abolished war and scrapped all its weapons. Except for one, the scientist named Zarko, who wants to conquer the world, and he needs to get weapons somewhere because they don't have any in this time period. So he decides to go back to a time when men possessed mighty weapons. And he looks at his time view screen and sees the nuclear blast at Hiroshima. At least I assume that's what it is. It's somewhere over the water and there's a lot of boats around. It could presumably be a test at Bikini Atoll or so. But I feel like given the amount of times they use the word Holocaust to describe various comic things that are absolutely not at the level of the Holocaust, it's probably Hiroshima. So he decides he's going to go back and get one of those bombs. And so we return to 1962 in the desert where they're at a weapons testing facility. I'm going to assume this is San Diego, but they haven't named it as such here, but
Yeah,
I feel like
Diablo was
probably would have been retconned.
Yeah, Diablo was a fallback name for a lot of their stuff.
Yeah, but San Diego in this case was also the base where Hulk is.
Oh, interesting.
So I assume that they've probably retconned this to be the same base, given that it's established to be in the desert in the Southwest. And they launch a missile, and Thor takes off chasing it through the air by the power of his hammer. And he catches up to the missile and just barely passes it. And so they comment on how Thor was faster than the anti-missile, but it's only barely, so their weapons are getting better. So this time when they had someone race a missile, they at least gave it a reason.
I would like to point out that the one guy to the right looks an awfully lot like General Ross. So
Yeah, that's totally General Ross. And then they're going to test a gamma bomb by blowing it up next to Thor and seeing if Thor dies.
Ooh, what a clever idea.
Oh, no, it's a cobalt bomb. Sorry, I got on.
I was gonna say I
General
don't
Ross
think it's
and
gamma.
started thinking gamma, but it's a cobalt bomb. And just as they're about to activate it, something materializes next to it, and it's Zarko's time machine. And he gets out and grabs the cobalt bomb and runs off with it. So Thor busts out of all the testing apparatuses they've got strapped onto him and throws his hammer at Zarko's time machine, but it passes through as the time machine disappears back into the future. So all the soldiers are upset that it's gone. But Thor finds a little piece of the ship, or of the time machine that fell off. And so he goes flying off to an isolated mountain where he summons a storm so he can talk to Odin. And he summons Odin and asks him how he can travel to the future to find where this metal came from.
Daddy, like, these bad guys totally screwed up things, so can I, like, go to the future? Please?
And so Odin tells him to duct tape the piece of metal to his hammer, and then spin the hammer really fast, and he enters the fourth dimension of time, and travels to the future year of 2262.
It's a clever solution, okay? You gotta admit.
It is not the worst solution.
We're poking fun at this comic so far, but I believe both of us gave it a pretty good rating, as we'll talk about
Yeah,
later.
it's not nearly as bad as I make it sound. It's just some of the ideas are very 60s. And
Like Dan.
Right.
he consults with
Smart
a
ass.
number of the locals to try to figure out where Zarko is, including Fat Scarlet Witch. Page 7, panel 2, bottom corner.
Thank you. That's a pretty good description.
It especially works because they miscolored the actual Scarlet Witch purple for the first couple of appearances. But anyway, the civilians tell him that Zarko has completely taken over the world with the power of the Cobalt Bomb and made himself the ruler because they had no weapons to oppose him. And Thor tells them that he has a plan. And so the next day, Thor goes to Zarko's castle, because even in the 23rd century,
Bad guys live in
people
castles.
used castles. And he just tries to walk up to the door, and Zarko sees him and sends the guards to go seize him. And so the guards get in these F-Zero race cars and go zipping off to go get him. But a mighty black-robed figure hurls a tree into their path. And they crash, and then Thor goes running in, and this black-robed figure is following him, and Thor wonders who this person could be. For the record, we never get an answer. He just disappears, and is never mentioned again, and doesn't turn up in the appearances even as an unknown character. This is clearly an idea they started to do something with and then just dropped.
Huh. So it wasn't like Odin coming to protect his son.
If it was, Stan never said anything about it. No one's been able to figure it out.
Huh.
Anyway, Thor runs in and confronts Zarko, but Zarko opens a trap door in the floor, dropping him into a room of magnetic mirrors. And he falls and is sucked into one of the mirrors by the magnetism. And then Zarko turns off the magnetism, so he bounces off the mirror to the floor. But before he can turn it back on and antagonize Thor some more, Thor throws his hammer, which notably still has the piece of the ship duct taped to it, at the magnetism device and breaks it. And Zarko is surprised that there's another Thor and wonders how that happened. And Thor's like, aha, the guy in the trap was a decoy. And you look down to the pit where there's just some random guy taking off his Thor wig and hat and cape. And Zarko whips out some other device and zaps Thor with it. It turns out to be a Delta Electron gun that will send him into another dimension from which he can never escape. But fortunately, Thor blows really hard. And so he breathes out with a hurricane force breath, which pierces the dimension veil before it can be fully closed, returning Thor to the third dimension in his pursuit of Zarko. I don't know how that happened either. And Thor chases him into another room that's full of robots, and one of the robots pulls Mjolnir away from him.
Mew.
And so he's like, if I don't get it back in 60 seconds, I'll turn into a human form, and Don Blake can't defeat Zarko. And they start a countdown in the narration boxes that actually works really well for imposing tension on this. Well, Thor starts ripping apart the floor until he finds a water pipe, and he pulls the water pipe apart, so the room floods. And the robots short out and drop the hammer, which Thor catches with literally 1 second left. And he goes back to chasing Zarko. Zarko gets into a rocket ship to escape, but Thor summons a storm, and so he causes really high winds, which knocks the rocket ship around until the cobalt bomb falls out, and Thor catches it like a football while letting the spaceship crash land. The medics pull Zarko out of the wreckage, but he's lost his memory in the crash, and he will never remember who he was, and so he is now completely safe, so they take him off to a local medical facility, while Thor takes the cobalt bomb and returns to 1962 and gives the bomb back to not General Ross. And then we see Don Blake entering the clinic where Jane's reading about his escapades in the paper. And she says if only she could work for Thor instead of bland, colorless Dr. Blake. And Dr. Blake walks off smirking to himself about how she'll never figure out he's Thor. The end.
And you guys like Marvel Comics because why? Asking for a friend.
I'm actually curious. I'm just kind of, I don't know. I gave this 3 stars when I read it,
So
but
did I.
I'm always questioning that. But
It's a lot more fun actually reading it than it is describing it, because a lot of the stuff just flies by really fast and doesn't go that deep.
yeah, but I mean,
And also looking at what it came after.
fun issue though. And I mean, this came after Loki, so no wonder there's probably a ton of people that don't really acknowledge this issue so much.
I mean, to be fair, we were both on the high side of the ratings, because this only has a 2.6 rating average.
Yeah. This was the first and only appearance of Bob, and of course this was the first appearance of the Tomorrow Man, who does appear again, and next appears in Journey into Mystery number 101, the A story.
That's the Thor story. By then they've got, well, they're both Thor stories, but they've got Tales of Asgard running in the background.
Are you sure Bob only appears once? Because what I'm looking at says it was his first appearance.
Yeah, it says first, but it's his only appearance as well.
Really?
They put first and then only, they say only 2, so
Bob. Journey into Mystery, number 86. Oh, well. Okay,
it's just
never
like
mind.
a random.
He's a random guy from the army. He's not even the Not Ross. He just got a name. Some people are a little over enthusiastic with counting appearances, so they count every random civilian they can find a name for.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's why there's so many characters that we say it's the only appearance of them. Do we have anything else to say about Journey 86?
It's stupid.
Not really. It's
Oh, well, I guess Dan did.
The only interesting element for me was the time travel piece, which they didn't really do a lot with.
no.
I mean, it was a good idea.
It's their first time playing around with time travel, so it kind of is
But
a big deal for that.
well, it
Yeah, and I mean, this is a 13-page story. They didn't have a lot to work with here.
yeah, but it does open up a lot of storylines that they could play with later.
Yeah, they do call back to Zarko. I mean, I don't think this is a surprising fact, but he gets his memory back and actually becomes a recurring antagonist.
Oh my god. How dare you spoil a decades-old story?
Yeah. I mean, he's still turning up in 1993, 95. He's got a lot of appearances in 95. They last used him in 2002.
Wow. Guess
So,
it's
I mean,
about time
this-
for a return. Let's fucking go.
So, I mean, this guy actually becomes, I'm not going to say an important recurring villain, but he's definitely not a one and done.
Well,
Okay.
I guess on that note, on to Strange Tales number 102. Prisoner of the Wizard. Let's fucking go. They make it pretty obvious from the cover and the story name that this is the first appearance of the Wizard, who will next appear in issue 105 of this shitty title. Besides that, there's no other characters to really talk about.
The Wizard is probably like the single most important villain of the Human Torch.
Objectively. Objectively, yeah, but I mean, our boy Triple P.
Yeah, I mean, he's no pace cut Pete for quality of villainry, but he's definitely the most important one.
Yeah, that's why I said objectively. We
Yeah.
gotta cover our bases here. But yeah, we get Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, of course. Larry's helping the right again. Jack Kirby on the cover and Artie Simic on letters. And this one came out in August 1962, apparently, which means this technically came out before the issue we just read of Journey and the Mystery, if that's the case. But it has a later cover date, so that might be why this one's after the last one.
I think they also just Frag did a lot of the ordering, and he likes to try to break up character appearances a bit if he can.
Yeah, I don't blame him breaking up Strange Tales a
just for
bit.
reading quality. Like, you don't want to read a bunch of unconnected stories in a row.
Just
They
for
try
reading.
to shuffle them around so you get some variety.
Just for reading quality, you don't want to read too many Strange Tales close together.
Yeah.
So
We can immediately notice that Human Torch stories probably aren't performing as well as they hoped because it only got a third of the cover.
yes, this one does only get a third of the cover, which is funny. That quickly changes to them giving the full cover to Human
They go
Torch.
back to it, but here they're just like, well, I might as well tell her hyper shitty robot story because people seem to like that more.
Yeah.
So we open up the Human Torch, Prisoner of the Wizard, Part 1. And they're like, look, the torch is blazing through the steel vault. He's trying to rob the bank. And they're like, oh, that is true. He has turned criminal. He must be stopped, but how? And then we see the Human Torch thinking to himself, if the fools only knew the truth, but they suspect nothing. My plan is working perfectly. Then we get a little recap of the last issue and how the Human Torch stopped. It's a crowd watching like a newsreel of how the Human Torch stopped the Destroyer and the Commie Sub. And then we see the crowd is like, oh man, I bet there's nobody who can defeat torch, and
I do like how somehow a newsreel photographer has gotten inside the common sub to film this final encounter where the torch melted Comrade X's gun with the fireball.
Yeah, pretty good.
Might have been Peter Parker.
It might have been.
Like, that fire guy's the greatest fighter in the world.
Bum, bum, bum.
And then they look over to this guy that has a weirdly stretched face, and they're like, "Hey, you know who he is?" And they're like, "Holy cow, it's the wizard."
It's Stretch Face.
So the wizard has a bit of a reputation already.
Yeah, why the long face, buddy?
I actually really like Kirby's take on his face.
I mean, it's different, so that's nice.
And sorry, Dan, I think I talked right over what you were going to say.
No, I just wondered why the long face. You know.
There's a reason.
I don't feel bad about talking over you anymore.
There was a reason I kept talking, Bill. I heard what he said.
Fine.
The wizard thinks to himself about how the Human Torch is mighty interesting, indeed mighty. Excuse me. And it will be interesting to match his powers against the Human Torch. And the wizard, a tall, gaunt figure, whom we shall follow as he rides. So we follow the wizard as he rides home, and he's like, "Fire is a powerful weapon, but I possess the greatest weapon of all, the world's greatest brain." Which that's why his head is stretched and blah blah blah, because he has such a big brain. So yeah.
I think they used that same justification for Egghead in a couple of issues.
Yeah, they do, I believe. I don't even think they necessarily say that here, but they hint to it. So, he's like, "Only a superior intellect such as mine could have designed such an ultra-modern home." And he's like, "Only the wizard could create furnishings and devices that are years ahead of their time. Inventions such as this air chair, the ultimate in comfortable seating." I don't know why he's trying to sell me the air chair, but here we are. He's thinking about how in his mental prowess, he is a latent contender for the International Chess Championship. So let's go. He pitted his skills against a chess champion and an electronic calculating robot, and won.
I do love that giant chess robot.
That's fantastic.
It's so shit, it's come around to being good again.
He's like, "I have performed feats unrivaled by the greatest magicians." As we see him getting put inside of a fucking safe with chains wrapped around him. And there's people telling him "Oh, you can't try that, you'll drown, nobody can escape from this change." And then was like, "Drop me, lock the door and drop me into the sea." And we see him managing to escape because he has this little expandable saw in his ring that he uses to cut through the chain, and then has a capsule that releases a gas which expands the metal of the safe so we can get out.
Yeah, it increases the air. I'm going into detail about this because it's one of my major pet peeves with this issue. It increases the air pressure inside the safe until the door pops off its hinges because it needs to release the pressure. But somehow he escapes completely unharmed, despite the fact that last I checked, humans are softer than steel safes.
Yeah, it makes no sense, but I mean, Stan Lee science, let's go. He's like, "But my greatest achievement is yet to come, for I will defeat the Human Torch." He definitely words it way differently than that, but I'm trying to get through this. And ironically, at that moment, Johnny Storm and his pals are discussing the world-renowned wizard. That's convenient. Yeah, Johnny says how he'd like to meet him one day. And then we go back to Wizard, who's thinking of a way to find the Human Torch. Nobody knows the secret identity. So how? Wait, I have it. So he comes up with the idea that he'll put himself in some danger, which only he can rescue, which only the Human Torch can rescue him from. And so we go to a few days later where we see this newsboy extra wizards, the wizard to dig the world's deepest hole. Read all about it. So we learn about this plan for the wizard to try and reach the center of the earth. We see him in this contraption that he's built, and he indeed is going to go to the center of the earth, but I mean, he's doing this to get the Human Torch's attention, so he causes he causes a cave-in on himself to lure the Human Torch to him. So
Now, Johnny's already met the Mole Man.
That's true. He has, yeah.
Why does he think, the wizard's in, like, dire danger and hasn't just drilled into one of the Mole Man's tunnels, and that's what caused things to collapse higher up?
Oh,
Yeah.
God only knows.
I mean, at this point, the Mole Man was only used once, so I don't...
Yeah, but
They
I
probably
feel
didn't
like they've
think that.
forgotten their own character history and they're having
Oh,
to
yeah.
do a different thing. Like, even more than the stuff where they bullshit away, the things they want to do different from the regular Fantastic Four magazine. Here they've actually forgotten stuff that's happened to Johnny.
Yeah. So it's displayed on the TV about... Oh, no, well, first we see Wizard with oxygen tanks that he's like, oh, little do they know I actually have oxygen down here to keep me alive for weeks. But we see at that time that on the TV there's a news bulletin about how the Wizard is stuck and he's gonna run out of air and it seems hopeless. So Johnny and Sue happen to be watching this. Thanks for coming for our panel, Sue. And then... Actually, this is the one where she appears later, I think, so I might have spoken too soon. So Johnny's like, oh,
spoil the twist now.
the Human Torch can make it. And we see seconds later, apparently, because he's Sumi Boy, he makes it over to the cave and rescues the wizard.
Yay!
They're seen shaking hands, and the wizard and Johnny is seen shaking hands, and then the wizard invites Johnny over to his house where he talks about how, what is he trying to do here? Special cameras. Oh, yeah, and then he talks about how there's he has these cameras that can take three-dimensional photographs for souvenirs of his honored guests. So Johnny's like, oh, I'm curious how that works. So Johnny stands in front of these interesting-looking cameras and fucking gets doused, so his flame goes out. And he gets doused by a chemical solution. They don't specify what here, okay. And then the wizard traps Johnny Storm so he can't escape Wizard's house. And then we see Wizard put on his fucking asbestos suit so he can so he won't be burned with his, because he's gonna become the Human Torch using science. And then we see him going to perform criminal acts, which is where we opened up the issue with. He was the one that was burning the safe open.
And now that Johnny's been doused, he's just being a shittier Ghost Rider because his head's still on fire, so that he can keep his secret identity.
Huh. Wow. This is just
So the wizard
horrible.
Yeah, and this is the better issue.
It really is.
So Wizard robs the bank as appearing as the Human Torch, and there's a cop shooting at him and everything. So it gets put on Human Torch, and then we also see him go over to a state prison where he starts breaking all the prisoners out, and there's a riot.
Whee!
And then he goes to a bridge and puts a wall of flames up so the cars can't pass through. And he's like, the price for passing my gate is $100 per car. $100 across the bridge? What? And then he also burns down a statue, which I want to joke is possibly a Confederate statue, but you never know.
It does have a horse in it, so...
Chances are, yeah.
So that's he's not fully a villain now, but he's like.
Well, I wanted to point out he's clearly very bad at being a criminal at this point because he starts with bank robbery and de-escalates from there. By the end, he's just engaged in petty vandalism. Like fire writing down Law and Order in the air and stuff.
Yeah, that's what he burns
I
his
wonder
session
if
and writes
Jack
down
handed
Law
the
and Order.
pages in backwards and like these panels got reversed.
Infinite.
It should escalate.
And then we see, meanwhile, back at the wizard's house, the chemical solution is worn off, and Johnny can go flame on. And so
He's so hot.
he's like, the one thing the wizard doesn't know is that I can increase my heat for short periods of time until nothing can withstand it. Yeah, we didn't know that either. So Johnny goes into an inferno, and
Come on, Ryan.
he burns. Johnny burns through the asbestos wall, which is his one weakness that he's had so far, is the asbestos. But because he can go into this inferno, he's like, oh yeah, they don't know. I can actually
Melt it.
I can increase my heat for short periods of time. And joke's on you, I made it through the asbestos.
That isn't actually a new power. He's used it several times before.
I can't remember if he used it yet before
He
this
used it to boil the submarine.
Yeah, but I
And then
meant
he also used it to get really hot and make that blinding flash to blind the Impossible Man.
I wasn't getting on the like intense heat because he has used that. I was more getting on the fact that he's burnt through his one weakness so far.
That's true.
That's my main gripe here.
Science, the asbestos.
Then he flies away and he's like, now to find the wizard. But then the cops and regular civilians are now chasing Human Torch because they think he's done the crimes. But Johnny finds the wizard. And the wizard's like, oh, you go free. Well, no, too late for you now, Torch. And, what's going on here, blah, blah, blah.
I don't think I know. It makes no sense at all.
The wizard invites him back to his house for
Coffee and donuts.
later to test for his final test of power. So they don't fight now, and then Johnny comes back to the house later. And this is where the wizard's like, I'm gonna prove my superiority by giving you a chance to save yourself, but you will not take it. He's like, in my hand I hold several photographs. They are photos of me getting into my fire costume and flaming, which is proof that I impersonated you. And he's like, the only way you can get these pictures is by using your flame to kill me, and I know you'll never do that. He's like, or you can play him off and fight me for the pictures as man the man. And he's like, then I can see who you really are and reveal your identity to the world. And
Or I could just destroy the pictures, and that way, no one will ever know, and you'll be fucked.
Well, he goes. He then goes into, or you can just remain as you are and watch helplessly as I set fire to the pictures.
I'm so confused.
The pictures are the evidence that exonerates Johnny.
Yeah, so why does he even take the pictures in the first place?
So that Johnny will fight him for them. You're assuming this story makes sense.
Not anymore. Wow.
Oh, this is so bad. This title, oh my god. He's like, it's ironic that the only proof of your innocence will be consumed by your own element.
I'm going to remind you once again, this is the better Solo Torch story.
This is one of the best issues of Strange Tales I've read to date.
It's for me too, and I've read the entire run.
And I'm up to like 111. I think 111 was the last one I read, and this is still one of the best ones. So Torch is like, I have powers you don't even suspect. He's like, I can make things move without even touching them. Which wouldn't surprise me at this point with the bullshit you keep coming up with. But the wizard's like, wow, that's impossible. Nobody can do that. Torch is like, watch and see for yourself. And then we see the pictures actually start floating out of Wizard's hand.
Oh, no.
It's like, no, it can't be. It's impossible. But Johnny's like, my will is stronger than the laws of physics and nature. I am all powerful. He's like, I vanquished you, wizard. And then Wizard's defeated. He's like, I challenged the Human Torch and lost. I'm beaten. So Torch calls the operator to get the police over here. And Johnny shows them the evidence, the photos of Wizard impersonating him. And then Johnny's like, well, I defeated the wizard as he walks. He's outside and the police car is driving away. But he's like, thanks to you, Sue, as we see Sue's head appear. so we learned that he smartly for once did something smart and brought his sister along so she could go invisible and grab the photos, and that's why it looked like the photos were just floating.
The end of the story is why I gave it 2 stars, because that's actually a really good ending.
It's actually the best twist in I think that I've read so far in this reading order.
And Sue got to actually be useful for once.
Yes, so for the use of Sue Storm, this is the main reason this one gets 2 stars.
I have to admit, Invisible Girl is cool because she's easy to draw.
Yeah, they literally don't draw her
Bingo.
until the final panels.
Well, even in 2 of the last 3 panels that she's actually in, they only mainly draw her head.
They outlined her whole body.
Yeah, especially in the second last one that you get more clear, but like she's not fully solid till the last one, and she's facing. We see her back at that point. Pretty easy deal right there. But yeah, that's the fucking end of that one.
I also had less blatant issues with this story. There was less that was completely wrong with it. It just wasn't a good comic.
Yeah. I mean, 2 stars still isn't we still didn't like it, but it wasn't god awful. So
No.
to remind everybody,
It's convoluted and stupid, but
yeah, it was fucking dumb. But it's only 2 stars. To remind everybody, we're rating out of 5 stars, and 3 stars is where we say it was like a decent issue and we actually liked it. So this still means we didn't really like it, but it was not it wasn't terrible. It wasn't like.
I didn't get angry reading this one.
It wasn't offensive to read it to our fucking IQ.
I'm fairly certain that a paperweight is smarter than the wizard at this point, but
I can't wait till we get further into Strange Tales, and the team up issue of Triple P and Wizard is gonna be a fun talk.
Oh, I actually like that one. I mean, it's not good, but I like it.
Oh, I like it too, but it doesn't do any favors for the Wizard, really.
No. When Paste Pot Pete is the smarter of the 2.
Exactly. It's great. Well, I mean, Wizard. We already mentioned objectively the most important villain introduced in this run, and Wizard does go on to be a pretty regular, recurring, decently important villain to the Fantastic Four. So it is definitely an important issue here.
You know what I find bad about him?
What's that?
The fact that Sandy somehow ended up taking orders from him for a while.
I forgot.
What the hell was the Sandman thinking, teaming up with this guy?
I forgot that happened. Because I haven't read any of that too, and I forgot that happened. Wow. I'll be interested to see how that works out.
I get the Trapster and Medusa and the terrible time she was having at that point, teaming up with him. But what the hell did Clint Marco see in there?
Mr. Sandman.
Bring me a dream.
Oh God.
Bum, 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 bum.
That popped into my head. There's not really much more to say, I guess, about Strange Tales 1 and 2. It introduced the wizard, so. Yeah,
Yes, it
that's
did.
pretty fair. That's
I
pretty
think
fair.
you guys are being very kind giving it a 2nd star.
Well, you read Strange Tales 101 and then 102 and then get back to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably would feel, you'd probably give it 2 stars as well.
I mean, we're pretty much on pace for 102 with the general consensus of the site.
But I was saying there's nowhere to go but up doesn't make something better.
And there is definitely other places to go but up.
Like the Court of King Arthur.
Oh, God.
Yes, there is a Strange Tales story that goes there.
Oh, dear.
No, it's not good.
Oh, dear. That can't be good. No.
I think it's the last one before he gets replaced, too.
That can't be good. That could describe the whole fucking Strange Tales Human Torch run.
Yeah.
There's been only one issue, which is like the last one I read, that I've given 3 stars, which means I could it was a decent story.
I've given a couple 3 stars, but they had Ben in them.
Yeah, fair. Ben does improve a lot of things. On to that note, I guess we will move on to Incredible Hulk issue number 4. We've got 2 stories in this issue. We've got an A story and a B story. The first one is called The Monster in the Machine. And this is the... Excuse me. This is the better of the 2 stories.
This is the best story in the 1962 run of Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, this is probably the best... This is the best story, but also can't be the best issue because it then has the B story that drags it down.
Yeah, I'm speaking specifically about the A story. When I say
Yeah.
that.
This is definitely the best story by itself. I say, in my opinion, the best actual issue is the last one, issue 6.
That's mostly because it ends.
That definitely plays a role, but they kind of were starting to get onto some stuff, which we'll talk about in a
I'd
couple
say the
episodes.
best Hulk issue isn't actually a Hulk issue at all. It's the crossover with Fantastic Four.
That's fair.
Because that was actually a good story.
Which we are getting relatively close to.
Yeah, because it's between 5 and 6.
It's issue 10 or 11 that happens. It's 10 because 11 is the big boy. So.
Oh yes,
But
11.
Stanley and Jack Kirby back again. Dick Geyer's on inks with Kirby on the cover as well. And we've got letters by Artie Simic, September 1962 release. The A story, The Monster and Machine, is what we're on. Not really any new characters here, so we're working with what we already have, which is actually continuity does help this title.
Okay, and while reading this comic, the soundtrack is dum 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 bum dum bum dum 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 dum.
So
Ice baby.
Okay. I don't know where to go. I'm gonna be a masochist and let Bill take the good story, and I'll take the bad story, so Bill can start us off. And
Alright, so this story opens with Rick Jones sticking the Hulk in some sort of Kirby Tech CAT scan device. And just as he's about to pull the lever to turn it on, we flash back to see how we ended up there. And somehow Rick's flashback involves Betty Jones's, or Betty Ross's experience.
Oh, I thought you were going to bring in
And she-
Archie there for a minute.
Yeah, she's
I wish.
pining about Bruce.
Oh, Bruce.
And then we get our flashback to the Hulk origin story, which we all know by this point. And we get a brief recap of pretty much everything that's happened in the first issue. They conveniently ignore the second and third issue.
don't blame him.
And then we come to the General getting ready to test an iceberg rocket. which is supposed to freeze something. And so they test this by launching a jet that's disguised as the Hulk and firing the iceberg rocket at it, so it freezes into a block of ice and then falls to the ground.
Dum 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 dum.
And Ross is inordinately happy about this.
Ice,
And
baby.
so he,
Sorry. A cryo rocket.
and so he sends the team, his soldiers, to go find Rick Jones because Rick knows where the Hulk is. And we cut back to Rick in the cabin with the motionless Hulk because he's still operating solely under Rick's commands. And Rick notices that the army's outside coming to get him. So he tells the Hulk to go. And then the army captures Rick. And they take him to see Ross and start grilling him about where Hulk is. And Rick refuses to tell them anything because he doesn't want to give away Bruce's location. And so the Hulk is just mindlessly flying along. And they describe it as a leap, but he's clearly actually flying. And he sees a school bus stalled on a train track, and a train's coming. And a little bit of Bruce starts peeking through, so he pushes the school bus out of the way. And somehow dodges the train himself, despite the fact that he's clearly going to get his legs hit in that panel. And then he eventually flies all the way to Hollywood, where he crashes a space monster movie and breaks a bunch of their equipment, and then goes to catering and steals all the food and scares everyone off. And they try to capture him, but he escapes and flies away again.
Well, you left out that he does his thunderclap for the first time.
Oh yeah. That is actually probably important.
That's like one of Hulk's most known moves
Yeah.
in this day and age. I freaked out when I saw that. I was like, yes, the thunderclap.
I was so checked out reading this series. Like, I like this story, but this part isn't where it's interesting yet.
And we're 8 pages into the 14.
Yeah, no, it really only has one good part. Good's relative in this title.
the last like third or quarter of it is where it's at.
Yeah. Anyway, Hulk flying away when Rick's message gets to him psychically that he needs help. And so the Hulk comes flying along and sees Rick in a jeep with a bunch of soldiers. And he pulls Rick out and flies him back to the cave. And they go down to the cave where they've built a machine to bombard him with gamma rays. And hopefully that will allow him to have Bruce's intelligence inside the Hulk's body. And so they put him in the machine. And Rick zaps him, and he turns back into Bruce, but he's super weak because he's been exposed to so much radiation. So Rick starts nursing him, and Bruce decides that he wants the Hulk's strength as well as his brain, so he gets put back into the machine and zapped into being the Hulk. And when he gets up this time, he has Banner's brain, mostly, and so he starts smashing the machine, and then he sees his house on fire, and he goes and he rips the wall off the house and throws it away to free the people inside it. And they all freak out because it's the Hulk, and so he starts swearing at them as he escapes. And they head back to the lab and zap him with a different gamma machine because he smashed the previous one. And it's actually drawn differently. And he turns back to Bruce Banner where he's weakened. But they realize that even though he can now have his brain in the Hulk's body, he gets some element of the Hulk's personality. So he turns into kind of a dick when he's the Hulk, and that's how it ends.
Which becomes more prominent. The dick personality of the Hulk. But yeah, that was pretty good. Even when the story was kind of stupid and nothing was actually going on, it was easy enough to read that it kind of just lent itself to be a better experience. So
Yeah, it was actually quite enjoyable.
it was a pretty good read. It was relatively fast too.
Oh my god, they actually bring back the iceberg rocket. I forgot that.
That's great. So, I guess, do we have any thoughts about the A story besides the basic? Oh, it's pretty good.
It's hands down the best Hulk story in this. The first half in this run, the first half is generic Hulk, but they've toned down a lot of the speech bubbles and a lot of the pointless narration, so it reads a lot easier.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then the second part, if they had a creative team to actually do something with it, the concept of Bruce willingly turning into the Hulk but being influenced by his personality is something they definitely could have done something with. Especially with the modern retcons on Hulk being Bruce's repressed emotions.
Yes, which was a very... they really got into the multiple personality DID aspect during the Immortal Hulk run recently, I know for sure. But I guess we shall move on to,
I'm sorry.
Yet again, and on a high note, as we talk about Mongu, the gladiator from outer space.
Dum dum dum.
The B story from this issue, they really could have ended it after 14 pages. I don't know.
You know, I will say on my second reading, this is not nearly as bad as I remembered it being the first time. It's I didn't hate it the second time.
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. We open up with somebody talking about how it landed suddenly, unexpectedly, swooping down from the skies without warning. We see this vehicle of some kind, this extraterrestrial-like vehicle.
It's a bird. It's a plane.
Lower into the ground, and we see people like, "Oh, what is it? Where did it come from?" And they're like, and without warning, it starts to open up, and we see a fist come out, and then more of the body, and then a full head, and he's like, "I am Mongu." Yeah, he's not a Guardian of the Galaxy. But at that moment, in another part of town, Rick Jones turns on his TV set where they see how some kind of monster just landed in the park. Happens to be that Mongu guy. And Bruce is like, I should be the last one to call anyone else a monster, Rick. And Bruce is like wondering who he is and where he came from. And then we listen into the newscast where Mongu's like, I have come to Earth to issue a challenge. I challenge Earth's mightiest mortal to meet me in hand-to-hand combat. If your champion defeats me, I shall depart forever. But if Mongu is victorious, then Earthlings beware, for then the warriors of my world will attack this puny planet and conquer it without mercy. And Mongu's like, send me a champion who can wield a 2-ton axe like me. And he talks about how he's going to await the champion in a lonely part of the Grand Canyon. He's like, if no one else arrives before the sun sets, I shall know none dare to meet me. The attack will begin. So says Mongu. And then he ends up leaving in this strange craft and heading towards the Grand Canyon as there's many a person below watching. So Rick is like, how can that be real? And Bruce is immediately like, I don't know, Rick, but one thing's for sure, he's for real. And Bruce right away is like, oh, I better change into the Hulk.
Go beat him up.
And immediately after turning the Hulk, Bruce is a dick. So that's nice. They keeping in mind that the Hulk can fucking jump/fly at this point. They get into a fucking 2-ton jet. What did I say? They get into a fucking chartered twin jet and streak towards the Grand Canyon instead of just fucking jumping or flying over there. 'Cause why not?
Right.
And Eddie's got intelligence. He wants to travel in luxury.
Yeah. And you don't know how well Rick would deal with a trip that long. You know, with no in-flight movies, no peanuts. You know, just scooped up in Hulk's smelly armpit.
Every 5 minutes, they're going to have to land so Rick can pee.
Yeah. Right, there's no seatbelts even.
Well,
I mean, realistically, come on.
it definitely is easier on Rick, but I
No.
mean, it's still
Ode to Hulk.
lacking some logic.
Sweat. You know, ew.
So they meet up with Mongu on a fucking rock formation at the Grand Canyon, and Mongu's like, when is this fool hardy enough to accept my challenge? Oh, he's talking to the third person, so he actually's like, oh, accept Mongu's challenge. And,
God, it's Donald Trump. Oh, yeah, I was talking to the third person. It's creepy.
And then Mongu's like, it is you the one I've been waiting for. But Hawk's like, something smells fishy about this. And he grabs the club and immediately, like, disintegrates it in his hands, essentially.
Yeah, I have a problem with that. Given the rest of the Mongo reveal, why did the club need to be made out of cardboard and corkwood?
Because Boris isn't strong enough to lift a real one.
Oh, but there's more to the Mongo thing.
If I ever stop dying. Hulk's like, just like I figured, nothing but cardboard and cork. This whole thing is a phony. And this is where we go into the reason why this is a one-star story for me. Mongu is indeed a phony, but there's nothing phony about your plight. You have fallen into my trap. You see, I'm not here alone. Take him, man.
Breathe, Ryan.
This is so bad. As we see.
Oh, dear.
As we see a man named Boris
Monguski. Boris Monguski.
Step out from what was Mongu out of what
My true name is Boris Monguski, and my real mission is to capture you, as I have done.
Yes, Mongo is a robot. Which is like, why did the mace have to be fake if it's a robot? It can lift a real one.
You don't know that.
So, essentially, this is a commie trap. And Hulk is now surrounded by a ton of commies. So it went from an alien invasion story to a commie story. It's all rolled up into one. This is incredible. So Hulk moves fast and hits hard. And one commie throws a grenade, but Hulk fucking palms that shit and catches it and lets the grenade explode in his hand. But unknown to the Hulk, one of the Reds had remained inside the strange ship, and then they hit a sound gun on the ship, which debilitates Hulk a little bit, but not enough for him to. He hits the ground to cause a quake, he digs under the ground, and then comes up and grabs the guy through the weird ship. If I could speak, would be nice. Which then gets the sound gun to turn off, and then the wily Reds still have another ace in the hole, as we see the commies have grabbed They've grabbed Rick Jones and they're gonna take him as hostage. And Hulk's like, you fools, you're all trapped here. You're playing direct. But they're like, oh, we can get out of here. Here comes our helicopter. We had it hidden in the hills. That will be our escape. Hulk's like, guess again as he throws a fucking... He throws a piece of the other ship into the helicopter to take it off course, I guess, because we don't see it I think they say that. Yeah, it takes it off course, I think. And, then they're like, oh, there's a limit to the frustrations which any man can endure, so the commie's just like, oh, fuck it, take him, we give up. So they just surrender like Dexter, tired of the Hulk's bullshit. And, so we then see the Hulk round them all together and tie them all together with a rope, before then jumping into the air with all of them attached by this rope and fucking attaching them to the goddamn helicopter by a cable. And then Hulk's like, oh, I'm leaving you now, but I'm leaving you now, but if you're not on the way back to Vodka Land by the time I hit Earth, I'll be back, and I won't be so easy on you next time. And so Rick Jones is celebrating Hulk doing it, and Hulk's like, oh, what do you expect, half pint? I wasn't playing for fun. And we see... Oh my god. We see our military guys show up, and they the good guys, they find out that it was all one hoax, the whole Mongu thing, as they see the shell of the robot. But the commies are actually gone, and they say how they found footprints and fingerprints that could only belong to the Hulk, so he's involved somehow. But then with the other one's like, oh, the whole thing must be his doing then. He wanted us to think that he defeated the menace from space. He wanted to be considered a hero. And then they thought, well, whatever the Hulk planned to accomplish by his phony scheme, it should backfire. Blah, blah, blah. He won't be able to escape old Thunderbolt Ross much longer. We see a newspaper that says, Battle of Space Gladiator rigged by Hulk. Public taken in by brazen hoax. But we see miles away in a hidden cave beneath the sea, one of the world's most fantastic transformations again taking place, as we see the Hulk turning back into just a good old Bruce. We see a massive door swing open as Bruce staggers out, as we keep seeing that every time that Bruce does the transformation, it takes a lot out of him, which it continues to take more and more out of him, as we'll see coming up. And then we get our little ending message, talking about how they must rest before the Incredible Hulk comes to life again.
Yeah.
So, that was a story.
Yes, I mean, nothing interesting or important happened in this story, but basically half of it is just the Hulk beating people up, which is pretty entertaining.
I strongly still stick to my 1-star rating.
I gave it 2.
You really did go nicer on it. Oh shit. I don't care for this story.
I mean, I found it inconsequential, but ultimately largely inoffensive.
Yeah, it's not particularly horrible in that sense. I mean, nothing about it really gets on your nerves.
Yeah, nothing's good, but it's just your general Hulk beating up the like waves of soldiers that they use.
Yeah,
a fair bit to just give Hulk something to do. I think I would have been madder if he actually fought Mongo, and then it turned out Mongo was a fake communist plot. But because that's just like instantly revealed, and they're just like, "Ha! We have you surrounded with soldiers," and then it's just Hulk beating up soldiers. It worked.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a good story, but it wasn't really bad either. It was just a thing to fill 10 pages.
Well, fill 10 pages it did.
Yeah.
Because I guess they didn't really have anything to get a full-length story this time, so they're like, oh, let's do 2 stories.
I mean, it's kind of the problem they were running into, that every other story was good for about 12 pages, and then they had another 10 to go that they just did nothing in. In this case, they just split that off and made it its own thing.
Yeah, it is. That has been a big problem for them.
Because it would have been way worse. I would have been way less favorable about this if they structured it like the previous issues, where they did the whole thing with Hulk changing how the rules of Hulk work again with the machine. So, and then they just, as part of that story, then he has to go fight Mongu. So the fact that they split it off and made it a separate story, I'm like, all right, I can read Hulk just beating up random soldiers for 5 minutes.
Yeah. I don't know. I just don't see any point to the story.
The point was to fill 10 pages.
Yeah, I mean, it exists, and it did fill 10 pages, and it adds to the database that is Hulk. As they move forward, they get more stories out there. And if you were a little kid, you'd probably enjoy it immensely. In that regard.
I mean, it is always fun when Hulk's just beating up random dudes. And he did some cool stuff, like when he just tanked the grenade explosion.
Yeah.
That was my favorite part, when he just fucking grabbed the grenade. I do have to say, in case anybody didn't figure out this might be the case, this is Mongu's only appearance.
Yeah, Mongu doesn't turn up. Oh, apparently I was wrong. I rated this 1 star when I first rated it.
I knew you did. That's why I made the comment that you really did take it easier on it this time.
Yeah, I mean, I would have rated it 2 stars if I was rating it now, because, like I said, there's nothing terribly bad about this story. It just doesn't need to exist outside of them needing to meet a page count.
Nah, I really hate it when it turned into a comic story, because it would have been more interesting as an alien invasion story in this case. I didn't like it, and it pretty much turned into a 2-for-1, and that I just didn't like it.
I can see that. Like, to me, the alien stories are worse than the comic stories, so I'd rather read, superhero du jour beating up random communist soldiers than beating up whatever made-up alien race they've come up with this time.
Well,
probably because at least the communist stuff, I get a look at the politics of the time, whereas the alien stuff is just...
Yeah.
Well, my thing was just that you look at the character design of Mongu, and it's actually not awful, so there was a chance to do something a little more interesting here, and they completely dropped the ball, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. Mongu could have been way better.
Yeah, this could have been, like, Star Trek hadn't happened yet. But one of the more memorable Star Trek episodes is the one where Captain Kirk dukes it out with the Gorn on an abandoned planet. And the winner gets to survive, and the race gets to survive. And you could totally do Hulk versus some alien, monstrosity, and, put the stakes up there where, if Hulk doesn't beat this guy, that's it for the world. So Hulk, kind of can get through the whole wrestling routine where, the good guy is beating on the bad guy, then he slips and falls, and the bad guy gets the upper hand. And just at the very last second, when you think that good guy's going to be down for that third smack, he magically suddenly finds the strength to kick. And then he gets up and he beats the crap out of the bad guy, and the wrestling match is over. But, I mean, you could have done that with the Hulk in the story, where it didn't have to be a communist. It could have been a monster from another planet looking to take over, and this guy's just reconning this planet. The Hulk beats the crap out of him, and he goes away.
Oh yeah, it could have been way more than it was, but for what it wasn't bad, and I tried to avoid punishing stories because I hoped they would have done something different.
Yeah.
I tried to just judge it on what it is, and what it is just a fun little romp where Hulk beats up a bunch of normal humans.
Yes. Yeah, and that's entirely fair, but
It's relatively harmless. It just hit some of my pet peeves personally.
Oh yeah, I like I said, the first time I read it, I think it annoyed me a lot more than the second time. And
You also have a lot more context for other shit too. That probably
yeah, the
makes
fact
this scene
that I've been
better.
reading stuff from the mid-50s made it seem a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was foundation there for later stories, about aliens in space and things like that. Where,
Yeah.
there was these were the seeds of what was what was going to come.
And that's one of the big things that I find really interesting about reading through an order like this. Is sure, you get a lot of pointless stories and random crap, but you get to follow how they figure stuff out. And
Yeah, and
like this was a template for something that I'm sure they realized down the line people would have liked to actually read that story.
yeah,
And so then they got a little more confident trying to do stuff like that.
yeah. Oh, I agree. Because if you look back at just simply because you guys are doing an historical review of Marvel Comics, you can see the seeds of where they were going to end up going, even now, with these, certain superheroes like the Hulk, and, they're trying, sort of doing the whole spaghetti test, throw it against the wall, see if it sticks. If it doesn't work. Let's try something else.
It's called WCW Brooklyn.
But,
No, if this was Russo, Mungo would have been Hulk's father. And then they would have had like a San Diablo missile base on a pole mat.
yeah. But, yeah, I do think it's a nice overview of where they started. And, what we have nowadays is the MCU on screen. Some of the most expensive and visually stunning films out there. And, it all began from these humble beginnings. So it is interesting in that regard.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And I mean, this was a bad chunk we had today.
Comics bad.
Yeah, I gave us a really good chunk.
Yeah. There was looking at this, there's one story I truly enjoyed, and one story I thought was all right.
Yeah.
And then everything else was some degree of bad.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, as the DC fan in me coming out, they had a lot of really good raw material, but it's almost like they were stuck in a rut. Like they had a certain type of storyline in mind and they couldn't shake it off.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because they're all written by the same person.
Yes, and you can see that.
Inked mostly drawn by the same person
Yeah,
too.
and you can see that.
Like I think at this point, Jack's drawing pretty much everything
It certainly seems like
as
it.
well. So it's literally two people trying to come up with a whole bunch of ideas.
Yeah.
And so they're going to fall back on the same stories they know how to tell.
Question. Was it Jack Kirby who came up with the concept for the Eternals, or did somebody else create them and he just drew them?
I believe Eternals are a Jack Kirby concept because he really started liking that New God style storytelling.
Okay, yeah, because it also certainly gave him room to play as far as an artist goes too. But I do, like I say, all DC fanboy aside, I do like that you're able to give people an idea of where everything started. And you'll be able to follow through and how it grew into becoming what it is today, which is, pop culture icon.
Yeah.
DC had its day, off and on over the years with the Wonder Woman TV show, the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, even the Batman TV show. Like DC has had its day off and on for years, but Marvel has really kind of taken the film technology to the next level and shown what you can do. And their characters are well-rounded simply because they've been around for so long and they've gone down all the dead end roads that they could go down.
Yeah, it's also the way they write. Like, I know I've said this privately, but I don't recall if I've said it on the podcast. But Marvel and DC take very different looks at, or different approaches to superhero stories.
That is true.
Like, I think the thing that encapsulates it the most is Clark Kent is Superman in disguise. Spider-Man is Peter Parker in disguise.
Yeah.
Like, Marvel writes stories about the people first, and they happen to be superheroes, whereas DC tends to focus on the superheroics and the powers, and not really worry that much about their personal lives. Although in the later years,
I was going to say,
they've changed with a lot of modern stuff, but for a long time, DC, like even in the 80s and 90s...
I'd be prepared to argue that, because anybody who's read the Perez Teen Titans or the Legion of Superheroes, there was a lot of interpersonal drama, and there was a lot of character building going on.
Yes, but that would be exceptions to prove the rules. I'm talking about like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman style books, like the big names that everyone knows.
Yeah, you bring up the Teen Titans and stuff, but those were kind of standout titles as their own. They were kind of doing their own thing, separate from a lot of the other titles.
They were the weird experimental stuff.
Oh, kind of like how
Teen Titans wasn't really supposed to do as good as it did.
Yeah, well.
Probably shouldn't have really.
Yeah, the reason it was good was because it had
was
interpersonal stuff. But that wasn't what DC generally was doing.
Yeah.
Again, yes and no. You're right in one sense, but there were titles that DC was doing that weren't that way.
Well, there's always exceptions.
Oh, of course. Just like there are plenty of Marvel titles that really are just a guy with superpowers. I mean, God,
Thor.
Look at what we're suffering through with Thor and Human Torch right now. They have no personal life. They're just...
And I'm just throwing this out there to be annoying, is why I think they got Chris Evans to play the Torch and Captain America. Because the characters are bland and, I mean, it's unbuttered toast. Chris Evans can play it.
Who the fuck invited this guy?
You did.
Yeah, right. It was you, dumbass. But no, I mean...
I'm actually looking forward to your commentary when we start getting to the deeper Cap stories.
Okay.
Because Captain America is like the Wednesday examine the politics of the day tree. Like, they do a bunch of bland generic stories with him for a bit, but once they settle on actually incorporating him into the modern world in his own title. I say modern, but it's late 60s, early 70s. And move past the initial Nazi story. They start really like using it as a lens to look at stuff like the Vietnam War and Nixon presidency.
Yeah.
I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of tangents when we get to the Cap stuff.
Yeah. Once you get out of this particular era that you're in, right? The tangents will go.
And actually, we'll get out of this one pretty quick. Within another year or so of comics, and they're not producing too many a month right now.
Yeah.
They'll have established the interconnectivity of all the titles.
Yeah.
And they'll have the ongoing narrative. Strange Tales Solo Torch will be revised.
Thank God.
It's not much better in its revised, but it gives more to talk about because you do have his interactions with Ben.
Oh, goody.
I have been enjoying it a lot more since Doctor Strange has been introduced.
When I criticize Strange Tales, that's purely Human Torch. I quite like the Doctor Strange stuff.
Me too. I'm glad that Ditko fought for that, but we'll talk more about that for
that's another
for when we get to it.
That's something else.
I know we've also kind of going backtracking a bit to us talking about the different lenses of DC and Marvel in the general sense. Of course, there's always exceptions to the rule. We've had this convo personally too, but I don't think we really talked about this. I know Bill and I kind of have similar feelings to why we leaned more Marvel way, though we're both like we like both.
Yeah.
The two of us. Why we always leaned more Marvel was like Marvel kind of always had the more grounded in general had the more grounded and kind of humanized approach, I guess. It was the more the world outside your window is what they would say. So it was more realistic in a way.
Okay.
In the general sense.
I could argue that on one level with but I also have to concede that DC started out with Superman and Batman, and while they did give Batman a backstory, billionaire playboy as a a young man as a ward, all this stuff. So he does have a life outside of superheroisms. But Batman himself, for the most part, for years, was very two-dimensional. So was Superman. Incredibly two-dimensional. And it was literally all just about beating up bad guys. There was not a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, you had to go to the little-known titles. Like, everyone nowadays looks back at Teen Titans as being great, but at the time, like, you couldn't go to the corner store and find a copy of Teen Titans. They wouldn't bring it in.
Yeah, that's true. I began collecting it as soon as the run started. And same with when they switched over Legion of Superheroes. Right, I started collecting that run as well, but I had to order them. I couldn't get them off, locally.
Yeah, and like I was early 90s when I was buying comics first myself, and I was just getting them off the rack.
Yeah.
Like, I'm quite impressed I've actually managed to complete both Absolute Carnage, or Maximum Carnage, and Onslaught, just on off the rack purchases.
Yeah. I will say, sorry, I've got one last thought. The one thing that I think saved comics was when they went from just being that entertainment sort of concept where a kid picked up a comic on a Saturday afternoon after he finished doing his paper route. He'd buy a comic and take it home so he'd have something to read. When it went to a broader story, Marvel, DC, even Carlton in some cases with series like Doomsday, they began to go from just being this generic Saturday newspaper storyboard to actually being, an expansive style of art. The comics were better drawn, they were better produced, the stories were better, the concepts were better, and comics suddenly came into their own as a medium of their own. And we're not there yet.
Oh no, but we're getting close. Like, the interconnectivity is one of the big things that always drew me to comics, was that, like, it felt like the effects of one title would affect the others much more than you got in movies or books or so.
Well, the interconnectivity and the structure of how Marvel and DC work also leads down the interesting path in the 90s of the big image boom, which is another interesting topic.
Yeah, I was right smack in the middle of that.
Yeah, we know Gen 13.
Yeah. It's not just Gen 13, Wildcats, you name it. But
I like Wildcats, to be fair.
But there was, again, comics went from just being generic with, no disrespect to Jack Kirby. I love Jack Kirby. Right, I'm a huge fan of Jack Kirby. But he was just pounding the stuff out so fast that, there was no real quality to the drawings or to the stories. And that...
No, it's pretty generic.
Yeah,
That's why Bill and I will make little jabs at his art.
Yeah.
Because we do it lovingly, because he's definitely a legend, but, like, he's on way too many titles.
To be able to produce in the way that he should. But
Yeah, well, I freely admit, too, like, even when he's only on 1 or 2 titles, like when he comes back to Captain America in the 70s, I don't like his art. I respect how important he is and what he's accomplished.
yeah.
But I don't enjoy looking at his art.
To be fair, also to that statement, Kirby is kind of better when he's doing, like, the cosmic shit anyway.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. When he
Yeah, like Kirby Tech, I used that term today. That's one of the things he's known for. He draws the really elaborate machines, and he's good at that.
and the
But I don't like how he draws
yeah,
people.
the exceptional bad
Yeah.
guys, like he did great with them. And
Yeah, I like his drawing of the Wizard, for example, with the really complicated, stretched, long face.
yeah,
That's good, but his generic lantern-jawed good guys are so bland. They're like 4 lines because he doesn't want to draw a lot of it. He's doing them every
Yeah.
page.
but comics did come into their own, later down the road, and they became their own viable art form. I really believe, even today, looking at a comic book, that it is its own particular medium, and it's a balancing act between story and art, and they do a good job of it. A lot of these companies do a fantastic job of it. Dark Horse, I thought, always did a fantastic job of taking concepts and stories and running with them, like they did with the Aliens and the Predator, stuff like that. Even The Thing. They took these ideas and just ran with them and made some amazing stories. Right. DC, Marvel, as the two big boys on the block. We're doing things like Alpha Flight and X-Men. And these were big, well-drawn stories with, good characters, good concepts, going places, not sticking to the norm. Same with DC. DC was doing this with a lot of titles as well, where when you picked up a comic book, it was worth the price because it was a labor of love with great art, great stories. You weren't going to be disappointed. You just knew you weren't. So anyway, but I guess my point is just that comics was, even back at the level you're at right now, you could see the beginnings of that sort of slowly happening. They were starting to get characters that they would go with on a regular basis. They weren't one-up characters and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the big thing that they're figuring out right now is how to differentiate their characters.
Yeah.
Because, like we've made fun of several times with the Westerns, you just have like 14 different generic kids. And other than the style of shirt and the pattern on their horse, there's no way to tell them apart.
Pretty much.
They all have basically the exact same personality, exact same stories. You could cut one out and drop a different one in and no one would notice.
Yeah, and you're very right.
And same thing with the romances for the most part. Like, they might have a different job or be a different teenager at school, but you could very easily sub out one friend group for a different one. And the story's exactly the same.
It was like Harlequins. You had maybe 4 or 5 proper storylines, and you just change character names and occasionally gender, and off you went.
Yep. And that's what they did with pretty much everything. So right now they're figuring out, like, they wanted to do the whole solo Human Torch, but they didn't really have any ideas. They just wanted to make money off of the Human Torch because people were writing letters on Fantastic Four books saying they liked him. So they're doing pure Golden Age stories with no depth or interest.
Yeah.
And just subbing Human Torch into what were probably old Captain America stories they had left over from their Commie Buster cap.
I suppose, yeah.
They did in the 50s.
Yeah, probably.
Like, I wouldn't be shocked if that whole first story with Comrade X was Ant-Man, but with
Destroyer.
the Destroyer in this amusement park, I wouldn't be shocked if that was a Captain America story from the 50s or an original Human Torch story that they didn't get to use because the books got canceled so fast and they just busted it back out.
Yeah.
And put on the veneer of the modern Human Torch.
Human Torch is the Bart Simpson of the Fantastic Four.
Oh, that's cold. I was kind of saw him as a Martha
What
Stewart.
did Bart ever do to you?
Yeah.
Well, The Simpsons was supposed to revolve around Bart, and Fantastic Four early on, there's a lot of pushes. Human Torch is like kind of more the main guy out of anybody, and then it becomes more about the unit.
Yeah, but I mean...
That's interesting, because I would almost read early Fantastic Four as being a Reed vehicle.
Yeah, because Sue's almost invisible in these stories.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Well, on that note...
Okay, fine. I try so hard. I try.
It's definitely. I mean, you could make arguments that Fantastic Four is a vehicle for anybody but Sue. So
Yeah, pretty much.
it's just
even a crystal vehicle before it's a Sue vehicle.
Torch was obviously the guy that Stan had the most stock in as a character.
Yeah, Torch was the one Stan wanted to write.
Yeah.
I feel like Ben was the one Jack wanted to write, and they compromised and focused on Reed.
Yeah, I never really understood the appeal of the Fantastic Four, personally. For me, reading it when I was younger, it was just, I just didn't care. I didn't like the characters.
They're not interesting characters. Other than, I like Ben. Ben's interesting, but and not Ben at this point, but Ben where he will be in about 15 issues. Once they soften him and start like actually giving him a personality beyond anger.
I've always had a soft spot for Sue as well. Like, of course, like Sue, decades down the line, becomes a pretty decent character.
But yeah,
that's a long time
away.
away.
Stories have never done anything for me until I did this started this read through and got to the big chunk where like everything important in comics came out of Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Black Panther came out of Fantastic Four. Galactus out of Fantastic Four. Like all the big things were happening in Fantastic Four.
You left the most important one.
Yeah, I did.
The Inhumans.
Fuck you.
Wow.
There's like
a few boos from the gallery, I see.
50 or so issue run where every single issue feels important.
There literally is that stretch there that like every issue something big is fucking happening, and it's pretty wild. It'll be wild when we get there.
Yeah, and then the fall is massive.
That's because they hotshot at the territory.
They really did, yeah. But yeah, they just all of a sudden they've got absolutely nothing, and the Fantastic Four is complete garbage. There's like no transition. It's just all good. All of a sudden they're fighting the fucking Swamp Thing. And I don't mean the actual monster, the Swamp Thing that has his own book and is kind of interesting. Just like some random swamp monster that they made up because the writer saw a creature from the Black Lagoon and only had 3 days to deliver a script.
I would hope it wouldn't be Swamp Thing. That's the DC character.
Yeah, it's Man-Thing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I always get those two confused because they're basically the same character.
Except the one's Steve Gerber.
Yes, and Steve Gerber's awesome.
Oh, man.
Anyways, guys.
Well, I guess we should probably wrap this up. Next episode, this is still like not like I think this is probably the second shortest episode so far, but next episode we have 6 entries we'll be covering. We are gonna do Fantastic Four issue number 8, open on a high note as we are introduced to Puppet Master. Tales to Astonish number 37, Strange Tales 103. Yes?
Oh, I was just gonna say I didn't think it was that high.
Okay, don't put my boy down like that. We have Fantastic Four issue number 9, Journey of the Mystery number 87, and last but certainly not least, my other boy debuts in Tales to Astonish number 38. So tune back next time. I have half the stories I have really good ratings on, and half are terrible. So it should be an interesting episode.
I have them almost universally terrible.
Okay, we have some different opinions next week
I
then.
gave the two Fantastic Fours 3. Everything else I hated.
I had. There's a third story I have there. That's a 3-star. Oh, it's the Thor. That's why. Okay, but yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, next episode should be interesting.
Yes.
Make sure to tune in. We hope to see you all later, and peace out.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good one.